When you hear about South Korea, you think about an amazing high-tech country with beautiful K-pop idols and addicting K-dramas that are dominating silver screens everywhere. But did you know that underneath all the glossy veneers, there's a dark side lurking within the land of kimchi? I think you should know the truth. South Korea gained its independence after the Japanese troops surrendered and World War II ended. Then they started their journey to become a democratic nation under the tutelage of the United States, whereas the Soviet Union gained North Korea as their mentee. It was not an easy journey, though. They struggled to find their place in the world as they were rebuilding their economic strength throughout the early 1950s to 1980s. South Korea was even dubbed as the poorest country in the world in the year 1953. They changed their strategy from an agrarian economy that depended on foreign aid to an industry powerhouse, thanks to their focus on education to produce a highly skilled labor force. South Korea succeeded in accelerating its economic recovery with 9% growth annually and multiplying its per capita GDP by more than 100-fold. The country's rise is not always smooth sailing. They took a hit in 1997 and had to receive a $57 billion bailout from IMF. So they started reforming their policy by liberalizing their economy and gaining more control over the monopolistic cabals and conglomerates. It seems like it's working because South Korea regained its momentum and became one of the largest leading economies at number 10 worldwide. All good things aside, these victories came at a price. One of the downturns of their economic growth is the rising household debt. It turns out that their GDP rise may have been aided by the people's consumerism. South Korea has the highest level of household debt among major countries, which means much of the country's growing GDP is because of debts. Do you remember the show Squid Games on Netflix? It turns out that the reality of South Korea is not far from the series. Plenty of South Koreans have been daydreaming of winning a reality show to finally pay off their debts. But the sad truth is, for the majority of them, it will remain a daydream. According to the Bank of Korea, the total amount of debt exceeded the country's GDP by 5%. This means that even if the average South Korean saved every penny they earn in 1 year, the total amount of money will still not be enough to pay off their debt. One of the biggest contributors to household debt is housing prices. Due to high demand in metropolitan areas such as Seoul, the prices have increased dramatically. Coupled with the country's very lenient policy in borrowing, mortgage requests in South Korea take up half of the total household credit. Ironically, 25% of them do not use this money to buy a house. Instead, for jeons. Jeons is a certain amount of deposit money that you have to pay up front to your landlord when you're renting an apartment or a house. And this could cost you about 60 to 90% of the real estate value, which is why you need to get a loan from the bank even if you're just renting. The second dark side of South Korea is its unrealistic beauty standards. We all know that this country is the plastic surgery capital of the world. Did you know that South Korea performs 24% of all cosmetic surgery in the world? That means for every 4 cosmetic surgeries performed, 1 was done in South Korea. Plastic surgery is so ingrained in South Korea that instead of the usual advertisements for food products or clothing, you can find advertisements and deals for plastic surgery inside Korean buildings or on public transport. Almost as much as 20% of all women in South Korea have undergone plastic surgery. These women are not alone, because the men are also opting to get the pretty boy look via cosmetic procedures. One of the causes why everyone wants plastic surgery in South Korea is because they believe that a person's facial features can determine a person's personality, fortune, past, present, and future. This might have been true though, because apparently 80% of employees have said that physical appearance is a determining factor during the hiring process. This is also probably why parents have gifted their children with plastic surgery for birthdays or graduation, because the skewed perception is deeply rooted in their culture. About 20% of people have stated that their parents have pressured them to get plastic surgery to ensure a better outcome for their careers. One more factor that might influence the perception of beauty is the beautiful K-pop singers, actresses, and models that grace the cover of magazines as a symbol of success. Almost every South Korean is racing to the surgery clinics to obtain the ideal beauty standards and reaches the same position as their idols. The problem had become so prominent that the government had to intervene. They asked for public transport to start phasing out the plastic surgery advertisements, but whether or not that's helping is still up in the air. Although K-pop idols have become the standard of beauty in their country, these stars are also suffering. Being an idol in South Korea is not all rainbows and sunshine. They have to undergo intensive training and may not get paid for years after their debut. As it turns out, when you become a trainee, you need to pay back everything the company has invested in you until your debut. Idols also need to pay for their stylists, makeup, outfits, recording, and all costs associated with managing. That's why if you don't make it, you'll get paid pennies every year after your debut. Some idols even go into debt keeping up their appearances due to not having enough engagements or shows. That's not the only bad thing about being an idol. They also have to follow strict rules such as no boyfriends, no junk food, no going out without company's agreements, no social media without approval, no touching or changing your hairstyle, and strict dietary regimen. This leads us to another dark side of South Korea: the fact that they have the highest suicide rate in the developed world. According to reports, more than 13,000 people took their own lives in South Korea in the year 2020. Currently, the rate of suicide in South Korea is 26 out of 100,000 people, and it's increasing every year. One of the issues for youth in South Korea is the growing mental health problems and how it's still stigmatized. Although 30% of young people in South Korea are suffering from depression, only 15% of them seek help. These issues can also be accelerated because of the pressure of the educational race that began early in kindergarten. The parents have become so eager to give their kids the best competitive edge possible. A South Korean student can even study for more than 12 hours every day, with their parents paying for extra classes and lessons just so they can get a head start. Because of academic pressures and stresses about their future careers, 1 in 3 high schoolers in South Korea have admitted to thinking about suicide. The youths are not the only ones suffering from pressures. It turns out that the higher suicide rate in 2020 was also driven by the elderly population. Most of the elderly who committed suicide was suffering from financial and emotional difficulties. Suicide in South Korea is caused by stress due to debts, inability to match beauty standards, and high pressures from fans and management of K-pop idols. Another fact that will disturb South Korea's stability is the low numbers of birth rate. Not only are South Koreans losing their population due to suicide, but it also seems that they are losing the battle of fertility. They not only have the highest suicide rate in the developed world, but they also have the lowest birth rate. The number of expected babies per South Korean woman over her productive life is 0.78 in 2022. The population has been shrinking since 2021, and the government has spent billions to fix this. But it seems that the trend won't turn around anytime soon. Most South Koreans are not eager to reproduce because of the issues mentioned on the list: rising prices, social pressures, and hyper-competitiveness. They focus so much on their lives on just surviving, it's hard to think of raising another human being on top of that. Hopefully, the South Korean government can turn it around and put its dark side behind them.